Okay, our next session is for the Hispanic vote. The vote is on. Please welcome Speaker Marcelino Miyares, Vice President of Mercury in Espanol. Marcelino?
Thank you. Just working? So I've been asked to speak about the impact that Latinos might have on the upcoming election season and a little bit into the future. It's a pretty hot topic. Not directly related to our business, but there are probably a lot of parallels, not the least of which is how is it going to affect our media environment this coming year. So in a lightning way, as this is called, I'm going to try to sort of cover some basic facts and our perspective on how the Latino vote is going to impact the future. Sorry, low tech. Politics has become a game of inches, just like our business, and the metrics are getting more and more condensed, and voting blocks are getting more and more defined. And Latinos, to the extent that they can be considered a bloc, are having more and more influence. You know, we've seen in the last decade, we've seen how one state can define who becomes president, how one congressional district can define who has power in the House or the Senate. And that's what I mean by a game of inches. So what are the facts related to how much influence Latinos from a numerical perspective can have on the electorate is important. And this is sort of the simple math of it. There were 6.6 million Latino voters in 2010, which was a midterm election, and that was a record turnout for Latinos. And compared to 2006, which was the previous midterm election, it was a growth of close to 15%. So every midterm election, we're growing significantly. And that's important because midterm elections are not the elections that draw out the most ideology at a national level. That represented at the time 6.9% of all voters, far shy of the 15% that we represent of the population, or 16%. Overall, for the upcoming election, there are 21.3 million eligible voters, which gets us a lot closer to the population. It's about 12% of the total, but you can say it's 1 out of 8, 1 out of 9 voters are going to be Latino. Those are eligible Hispanic voters. One of the myths that we're always up against is that not all Hispanics vote because they can't. And in fact, there is a large number of Latinos who are not eligible to vote, 24%. It's a big number compared to like 1 or 2% in the general market. But the fact remains that there are over 20 million Latino voters, and they're very concentrated in essentially 4 states, in California, Texas, New York, and Florida. More importantly, there are 118 congressional districts. That's roughly 25%, a little over 25% of the congressional districts, in which Latinos represent 20% or more of the electorate. So at a congressional and at a senatorial level, we're going to have a much greater influence than we do presidentially. There's a company called Latino Decisions, a polling company that estimates that for the presidential election, a little bit under 10% of the Latino electorate will vote, which again is pretty significant. Today, 2/3 of Hispanics favor Obama over any of the existing Republican candidates. However, it's very much part of the Republican strategy based on the success that they had with President Bush, that if they capture anywhere between 41 and 43% of the Latino vote, that's 41 to 43% of that 9.5%, that they're virtually guaranteed to win the election. So it seems kind of far away for that to happen, but there is a simple math that suggests how either party can really lock in this election. Language and media matter. 1/3 of the electorate, I'm not talking about the population at large, but of the electorate, still predominantly watches Spanish language television and listens to Spanish language radio. A big part of that is driven because of geographically where they're located and how much media, Spanish language media there is. Remember, most of the electorate's concentrated in California, New York, Florida, and Texas. There are dozens, if not close to 100 broadcast media outlets and publications in those states. So the accessibility of Spanish language media has a lot to do with this. A third of them watch and listen English language media. Those are being reached through our normal campaigns. And then a third, this is very important, they cross-watch or cross-listen. Messaging and what this means is that messaging needs to be consistent across media. Meg Whitman ran a California campaign for governor 2 years ago, and she made the mistake of having one immigration policy in English and having another one in Spanish. And it was immediately noted. You could drive down any street and see billboards in either language and see the contradiction. So it's important, because of how much cross-listenership there is, it's important to make sure that your messaging is consistent. And it should also be language agnostic. It really shouldn't matter what language you're advertising in. There are estimates that close to 2 billion, lost my slide there. There are estimates that close to $2 billion are going to be spent in this presidential election. Only a fraction, probably far less than 3 or 4% of that will be spent in Spanish, and it's probably a mistake because such a large part of the electorate is going to be left out. There's another important factor. Latinos get most of their information. In fact, they educate themselves primarily, when it comes to electoral matters, primarily from television. Television and print play a really important role in other aspects of our lives. Health education, financial education, and politics is going to be no different. So having a presence, whether it's advertised or whether it's public relations, a publicity presence on Spanish language media is really important to integrate Latinos. What's at stake? And this is the last slide. What's at stake for the Latino voter in this election? For one, and it's not, immigration's important, but immigration's not at the top of the list. Hispanics believe, this is according to the Pew Hispanic Center, Hispanics believe that that the economy has hurt them more than any other sector in the United States. Any more than blacks, any more than Asians, any more than the general population. Close to 70% of Hispanic wealth has disappeared because of the housing crisis. And unemployment is 3 points higher in the Hispanic community in general than it is in the Hispanic electorate in general than it is in the population at large. So the economy is very much top of mind for Latinos. One side note, and this has a lot to do with how campaigns should address the market, is despite this, Hispanics are the most optimistic, the most sanguine about their ability to succeed in the American economy. So they're here to roll up their sleeves in their work, and even though they believe that they're more affected than the norm because it's a very cash-centric economy, they're still very optimistic about what this economy and what this country can do for them. The top issues in this order, it would make sense, are jobs, education, and health care. Those are the top 3 issues. Close to 50% of all Latinos say this is their #1 concern. And then the deficit and immigration are tied. 1/3 out of all Latinos believe that those 2 issues are the most important. So overall, these are the sort of the top 5 issues. Other things that are kind of in there that are related is the number of deportations. The Obama administration has really stepped up deportations in this country, puts Democrats in an awkward position, but they still support him. And then the DREAM Act and the country's inability to really bring out the DREAM Act is also factored in. And finally, where do they stand in terms of the conservative-liberal spectrum? It's pretty split. 35%, 1/3 believe they're conservative, 1/3 believe they're moderates, and 1/3 believe they're liberals. So bottom line is that the market can have an impact in this game of inches, and the market is pretty much up for grabs. The political divisions between Republicans and Democrats are pretty standard over the past few generations, but those lines are starting to blur as the real important issues of jobs and education and these kinds of things begin to or continue to not really be resolved by anyone. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Marcelino.